generation. Thank you so much for being right here. This is a cold, rainy day, so you must have a passion for being here. We thank you. Thank you so much. We have delayed you enough. Thank you to Adamu Waziri. He is kind straight from the lovely peaceful country of Nigeria, our motherland. Thank you for being here. And we have also in the audience Roye Okupe, the creator of EXO Comic Book. And we have our lovely moderator in pink, and Fushia, looking so lovely today. This is Jola Naibi, also called Yola Jantik, and she is the author of Terracotta Beauty. So we're going to have you guys sit down and start, and we open the floor to you. Thank you so much. Enjoy.
So my name is Motola Okay, this one is good. I won't say too much about Roye and Dalu since they know themselves better than I do. Actually, just met Roye for the first time today. So one of the things that I wanted us to do was to go down memory lane for both gentlemen. I'll start with you, Dalu, since it's easier for you to engage with us. You're not exactly in the room with us. To go back down memory lane and think about what the your childhood influences were. Those of you have definitely had the part of yourselves in the animation field. We had seen, for those of you who weren't here earlier, we watched 4 episodes of Vino and Vino, and I thought it was fantastic. And it's always good to see, and I don't want to make this sound a little bit too prejudiced, it's always good to see people who look like you on TV, and not people who don't look like you. You're more able to relate to those sorts of images. So I'll open the floor to you, Adamu. Tell us a little bit about your background, your childhood, where you grew up, what your influences were, who did you watch, what kind of made you go into the animation field?
Okay, first of all, thank you very much for having me. I think as a kid, I've always loved cartoons. So I think I grew up in Lagos at the beginning, and what I watched on the TV is what everybody else watched. You know, Sesame Street, Speed Racer, Voltron cartoons, all of those things, and of course things like Tales by Moonlight, which was more of a Nigerian production. And I think ever since then, I've always been interested in drawing and animation. So it was something that I knew somehow I was going to do. Even though as a child, I wasn't even sure what animation was. I just knew I loved cartoons. So that was the direction I was heading in.
Roye has different sorts of flavor of cartoons, which it's really, so Vino and Vino is a family show, and then Roye has your superhero. I don't want to compare it to Batman or Iron Man or anything like that because we are our own people. But it's EXO, and it's the legend of Wale Williams. So tell us a little bit about what you watched when you were growing up and what was the inspiration for Wale Williams.
First of all, thank you for having me here. I think, like Adam said, most of the things he grew up with were some of the things I grew up with as well. But I think I was more drawn to the superhero cartoons, Batman, Superman, Transformers. It's so funny that these are things that I guess this was 20, 25 years ago that I grew up on, but you still see them today. So it's amazing how these cartoons that I grew up, they've been able to spread up to another generation of children growing up right now, and it really does show the power of storytelling in terms of superheroes. I believe I was drawn to them because for me it was a chance to escape an everyday world where terrible things happen. At least when you watch superheroes, at the end of the day, the superheroes save the day. I think that's honestly why I was so attracted to them, because no matter what happened, they would always find a way to help people. They always find a way to save people. So I think as a child, that was something that I really, really was moved. I guess, yeah, I was really inspired by it. And but the one thing that, like you mentioned, I didn't see any from Nigeria. And as a child, I didn't really see how it affected me because obviously, okay, I had Superman and Batman, but it wasn't until I came here to the US and then I started seeing more of the movies that you see today in theaters, you know, the Avengers and things like that, Iron Man and Batman. And I was just like, wow, these things are so popular, but we don't even have any from Africa at all that, you know, can be a representation of for us. It's so funny that, you know, for people that have seen the most recent Captain America film, everybody shouting about Black Panther now. But I mean, it's taken like how many years? I mean, superhero stories have been telling superhero stories for almost since the 1930s, and now people are just recognizing African superheroes. I think there's a problem with that, which is why I decided that, you know what, I was going to do the superhero from where I was from. So my inspiration comes from the fact that I want children that are growing up, not just in Nigeria, but here, Africans in diaspora, children, not just children, but even adults, to be able to see a different side of the superhero story and African superhero.
I'm glad you mentioned the Captain America series, and I'll come back to that in a minute. The Nigerians in the room can correct me, but there's a saying that we have in Nigeria that a stranger will not show me the way to my father's house. And so what that means is that you know yourself better than you know anyone knows you. We do see, you know, images of Africa in mainstream media, but sometimes, I won't say most of the time, those images are not as accurate as they should be. They're not an accurate representation of where I grew up anyway. And so why I use that proverb about a stranger cannot show me the way to my father's house, we're allowing strangers to tell our stories for us. I haven't watched the Captain America movie, but I've read, you know, online that they call it Lagos. So there are places there, I mean, Lagos is what we call it. So if you want to tell the story, at least you need to know how to say the name right. It's Lagos, for those of us who are not from there. So thank you. And I'm from Lagos originally, so that's why I'm taking it so personally. But it's always interesting to see that our images are represented by strangers, by foreigners. We accept it, but then we want the stories to be told accurately. I want to go back to something that I read online that you said. People complain that Africa is not represented well in the media, but Africa, Nigeria is not as poor as you think it is. It's not, the images that you see are always images of poverty. You have businessmen, you have infrastructure, you have the wherewithal. This is something you said on CNN. You need someone to sponsor it, to market it. So we don't need to wait for Disney. We can do it. And we have, you know, examples of people doing it here. But the question I have for the two gentlemen is, what do you think it will take for us to get to where we are? So now we're making baby steps. Unique Studios has brought out EXO with Wale Williams. We have Pino and Pino actually being shown on BBC now. What will it take for us to get to where we'll be making giant strides, where people will not be calling it Lagos, and they'll be calling it Lagos, which is what it's supposed to be? I'll start with you, Roy.
I think in terms of the steps, I'll say a couple of things. Number one, I feel as creators, sometimes we depend a lot on external factors to be able to start whatever I want to. And not just as creators, I think just human beings in general. There's a lot of fear when it comes to starting out something that maybe you have a dream about, maybe that you're inspired to do. And for me, I experienced that fear a couple of years ago, about 3 years ago. So initially, I wanted to come out with the animated movie first. And so I did an 8-minute pilot. And I was shopping it around to many people from BBC, Viacom, BET. And while all of them said, oh, we like what you're doing, it was more, well, okay, we don't know whether it's going to sell. It's an African superhero. We don't know, okay, if we put it out there, people going to watch it, things like that, blah, blah, blah. So basically for 2 years, I was just walking around trying to get another person to make my own dream come true. And after a while, I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to do what I can. That's when I decided to do it as a book first and then promote it online. And let people actually decide whether or not they're going to watch it by actually putting it out there. And that was when it it's really just exploded. It's been featured on CNN, BBC, Forbes, the New York Times, Huffington Post, and a whole lot of other blogs have been carrying the book. But what am I trying to say here? I feel like as creators, we need to we don't necessarily need to wait for someone to come and give us money or someone to give us a platform to, like the internet has basically leveled the playing field. If you have an idea, this goes way beyond animation, to be honest. If you have an idea, if you have a dream, if you have a goal, just go out there and do it. And don't just do it just for the sake of doing it, actually do it well. Because I think quality will take you farther than you can imagine. The reason why people are actually sharing my book or talking about my book is not just because it's an African superhero, you don't see it every day. Mexicans buy my book, people from Asia buy my book, people from Europe buy my book. And it's because I put every single thing into it to deliver a quality product that Africans can be proud of. But it's not just for Africans, it's for anybody that can enjoy a great story. So I think the onus is on us. Yes, we would like more support from the community. Of course, that's always great. But I feel like we use that as a crutch a lot of times to say, okay, people are not supporting us, so I'm not doing anything. Go out there and do something. And then, hopefully people will support you when you put something out there. That's quality. So I think that's just number one thing. We need to put out quality content. And don't just compare yourself to the peers. I compare myself to the best. I may not be as level of one way Disney. Well, that's my benchmark. My benchmark is not the next independent guy. And this is no disrespect. I don't do it as disrespect. If I don't compare myself to the best, then why exactly am I?
That's a wise word because you wait for the start and eventually get there. Let's hear a little bit from you, Anthony, about what your thoughts are.
Okay. First of all, I just want to say hello to Roy because I admire his work. I think for me, there's several issues. To be honest, I don't mind if they call it Narcos or whatever, because for me, we need to step up our game from our own side. Everybody from customers, viewers, the audience, producers, the business community, investors, everybody. As creators, we have to create. As an audience, we shouldn't only complain, but we should also aggressively support. But there's another thing Roy said is that it's like we have to do quality work. It has to be quality. It has to stand up to anything else that's outside. In fact, we pretty much have to do what Disney do. Produce it well, attack it hard, and give something that the audience, not just Nigerians, not just Kenyans, but if a Japanese kid wants to watch something that's good about Africa, he can watch our stuff. So it's not just supporting it just because it's Nigerian or just because it's black or whatever. It has to be good content. But it has to come from us. It's not Hollywood. It's not. I don't care what Hollywood is doing. I'll watch it. I'll enjoy it. But we have to do our part. That's my own standard.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm going to ask if there's anyone in the audience who has questions. If you say your name, tell them who is this you want your direct question at.
Kim Rankin, yes, interested consumer. Question for Mr. Waziri. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Waziri?
Yes, you are.
Thank you, sir. So what I'm wondering is, because I agree with all that you said, we need quality content, right? And we need to be the drivers of that content. What it seems to be that we're lacking is that sort of that quantity in terms of capital, right? So we know that quantity in the terms of capital, which means dollar bills, whatever type of currency, is a driver of how we can get to quality. So if we can't necessarily look to the BETs or the Ken Chenaults or the African or African American Fortune 100s for whatever billions we have in those circles, where else do we go to? What else can be the capital drivers that we can finance the quality that we want to get to? Because homegrown is fantastic, but from what I understand as a non-technical person, you know, all of these elements, graphics, technology, etc., take money, right?
I guess I also add that to say, I guess, if you say a little bit about how you're funded, I know that you shared openly how it's been a challenge to use prime funding in order to be able to get this dream, make this dream come alive.
Okay, well, we've been self-funded. We've been bootstrapped since day one. It's only now that we're getting some interest from investors. And we've been in the game for like about maybe 9, 10 years now. I think there's several things that need to come into place. Investors with the capital will also have the vision. Because you can bring money to it, but if you don't have vision to stay the course and to basically have an impact, there's no point. So that's why we haven't really accepted much investment money, because they didn't really have the vision. That's up to date. So another place, the best place to get your funding from is actually customers. So either we as companies have to grow organically and prove our value. I think it's a combination of those things. That's from our experience. It's nice to have the dollars, but in Nigeria we've had a lot of resistance. And in fact, we're going to have to educate some of the investors. Because most investors are looking like, looking at towards like raw materials, I don't know, oil, whatever it is, telecommunication. They're not looking at this sector. So I think it's kind of like a 50-50. We need to kind of like prove that the audience wants this content. When they see there's money in the industry, then they'll start coming in. But a lot of like pioneer work has to be done. That's the way I see it anyway.
Yeah, can I say something real quick to that? He made a very good point about bootstrapping, which is basically what I've done myself. Well, when I was still working 9 to 5, I was basically putting everything into my side hustle, so to speak. And then I quit my job, I cashed out my 401k, and I put that again into the business. It sounds insane because I had a very good job. I was a web developer. I was making good money, but that's where the passion comes in. I always tell people, if you don't have passion for what I don't care if it's animation, whatever it is. You can want to sell cakes on the side of you have to have passion for it, because that's really what's going to push you. So my passion drove me to an incessant need to be successful at what I do, which now actually made me take certain risks. But those risks weren't just random risks, they were actually calculated risks. So when I quit my job, I also started another business for web design on my own while I was doing this as well. And like I said earlier, the internet has pretty much leveled the playing field. There's also crowdfunding. Again, crowdfunding, you have to take the same model in terms of, don't just go there because I just want to grab people's money. Like, you have to have a purpose behind it. And again, your quality has to be able to stand out from everybody else. I've done 2 Kickstarters now. And Kickstarter is one of the most difficult things to run, because they're basically hounding people for money. It's already hard enough doing that, but then it's exponentially harder if you're doing it with a subpar product or something that is mediocre. So I feel like there's a whole lot of ways to raise money now, like I said, online, bootstrapping and things like that. But another mistake I feel people make is that they always look, and I did this as well, they always look at the companies like a Disney and Apple, and they see them as conglomerates and they want to be that. There's nothing wrong with that, but these companies started from somewhere. So, like for me, for instance, I want my characters to eventually be not just in animation, but even live action movies. But I know that that's not very realistic right now. Sometimes it's not possible, it's not realistic. So I had to start from the ground, from the comic books, because I can afford that. But let me even give you a very basic example. Let's say I want to start a restaurant. I have a dream, I want to start a restaurant. And even people that want to start a restaurant, they make these mistakes to where they look at, okay, I have to raise $1,000 for rent, I have to pay staff and all this. Why don't you just start with orders online? And then you grow from there. And then you get a food truck or something like that. And then you grow from there. And then, you start doing it in your garage or whatever. Then you grow from there. And then, like he said, you slowly put out content. They've been doing it for 9 years. I've been doing this off and on since 2008. I only really started doing it full time last year. But like, if you continue to put out things consistently, people will begin to trust you. Like a customer will begin to trust you more. And it's not that it's easier to do that, but it's more realistic to build up to something than look at the end goal and say, okay, I want to have this big thing. But you always have to start from somewhere. And if someone doesn't give you money from outside to get the big thing, then you use your own small money to start small and then grow with it. That's basically, honestly, what I've done. And it's part of the reason why I do what I do, because it's not just about, I want my characters to sell, I want my books to sell. But one of the main reasons I'm doing this is because I want to inspire people to chase their own dreams while I'm chasing mine. Because you can see that I'm actively doing what I'm doing. I'm not the most talented animator. I always tell my friends, it's not as if there's anything really special about me. I just have a relentless desire to achieve my goals when it comes to what God has put in my heart to do in this life. And I feel like if an ordinary person like me can do extraordinary things, it's no excuse for anybody else who actually wants to achieve their own goals as well.
Can I just say something? Just briefly, what Roy said is true. You see that we have to have almost like a 50-year to 100-year arc or vision about this. Because Disney didn't just pop up yesterday. And for us to have the same kind of social impact and media firepower, we have to be doing this for at least 50 years. It's not like a short thing. If you look at how much those guys have invested, billions. So for us to be able to, have that kind of firepower, it's going to take us that kind of time and that kind of effort.
I would like to take us maybe to our vision for 50 years from now. One of the things that, oh, sorry, you have a question?
No, not a question, I have a comment. I just wanted to make a comment.
Okay.
That's fine.
Yeah, my name is Essen, and I just wanted to add a couple of things to what both Ray and Osirio are talking about. This is a very, very important thing. We're at a time when there's a lot of creativity there's qualitative creativity that's coming out of Nigeria, Africa, or wherever. And I think both of the things that you've both said, about vision, about length of time, and all of those things are very, very important. And they're actually critical to achieving anything, for a sustainable future. So what I wanted to suggest is this. We identify each other by a set of criteria in terms of the quality of work, in terms of the vision that you have for your product, for your dream, or whatever it is that you're trying to create. But essentially, all these things require an audience. Now, I think it may be wise to in some way, once we are able to identify different slots, to engage in constructive partnerships that are aimed at controlling an audience. Because if you do not secure an audience, if you don't secure an audience and you don't maintain an audience, then how you raise funds and how you get money from that audience is always going to be up today and down tomorrow. And it's always good. So I think that it's very important. And I don't know if you know, I run an organization called the Nigerian Nostalgia Project. And this is essentially what we are aiming to do, is to build an audience, secure that audience, make sure that audience is engaged, and then be able to deliver qualitative work like the kind of things you're
introducing to this audience. So I'm very, very interested in talking to both of you about how we can build a strong partnership, not just for animations, but for all kinds of things, literature, for film, feature film, documentaries, everything, any kind of thing that, photographs, everything that comes out of that helps to create an identity for Nigerians, Africans, and what have you. And I hope you get what I mean.
No, definitely. I mean, I think you make a very great point about the audience, and it's something that's, and I know that Adamo can also, talk about it. It's something that we as creators we struggle with every day. Is trying to actually capture that audience, because like he said, the people like Disney and Marvel, they've been doing their things for almost 70 plus years. So they've been able to build brand equity with the audience. We are starting, but we're not just starting out. We're now just trying to get exposure in terms of African animation and African comics and things like that. So I agree with you in terms of nurturing that audience and actually, yes, exactly. Yeah, I agree.
I think what I can say is I think good points the fact that Disney, he started small. In fact, many times he's quoted as one of the biggest failures because he had so many times when he fell down and he stood up. And now you can't say the word animation without having certain the name Disney to it. I wanted to actually ask you, Adam, so you've been able to crack the nut a little bit and you're being shown on mainstream media in I think in the UK. I read that your Bino Akira is being shown on BBC. What was your outreach mechanism? I know that it must have been a very painful process. I could read between the lines when you were talking about the whole investor story, that sometimes when you're a creative person and you're seeking investment, there is always that difficulty of trying to match apples to apples, because when the person with the money bags comes and they have a different vision from you, there is that potential for them to dilute your creativity and try to change the voice of the story that you're trying to tell. So tell us a little bit about what the outreach was like, how you were able to crack the nut a little bit and find yourself where you are today.
Well, I mean, we're not actually on the BBC.
Sorry, my mistake.
Just to clarify, we've had some interesting meetings with people where they've said they can get us on some platforms, but we'd have to change a few things, like make it a bit add a few, make it less Nigerian, whatever that means, or less. We've had some interesting meetings, but I think we just have a vision. We just know what we want, and we just keeping it simple, keeping it from here, keeping it true to the culture, keeping it true to the people, having representation, which also goes back to that thing about the audience, because without the audience, you're dead. And we wanted to give something that was authentic. You can't have something that's based in, let's say, Lagos, and half the characters are European. How? But those are some of the discussions we've had. So I think the way we've managed to get to this point is just sheer focus. And focus is one thing, but trying to give something that is good, that is of value to the audience. Because if they don't buy, if they don't support, if we don't help educate the children, if we don't help give some kind of positive representation of our culture, of our people, or even our color, the African diaspora, we're not doing anything good. So without doing those things, we wouldn't have gotten to where we are now. Providing value, that's it. If we don't provide value to at least a segment, we won't go far.
Do you have anything to add?
Not really. I think he really said it best with the last thing he said. Like just honestly, just providing value. And one thing I can say is that like I mentioned earlier, in terms of outreach, quality does speak a lot on its own. But there's also another aspect of reaching out. Like, and I feel like a lot of times creators miss out on this, where they focus so much on the creative end and they don't think about the business side of things. So for me, when I started doing this, it was more of, okay, I want it to be as great, I want it to look as great as possible, but how can I put myself in a position where I'm more educated as a businessman, as a marketer, as a public relations guy, and these are all things that I studied on my own. I didn't go to school for it. Like, my Kindle library is probably like 100 books strong, for just different things that I try to educate myself about. Because like he said, we're bootstrapping this thing, so I don't have the funds to be able to hire a marketer or a business consultant or anything like that. But again, I can't let that stop me. So I have to now, the onus is on me to educate myself while I can still do this on my own, to be able to look at the business aspect of it. And, because a lot of people ask me, how did you get on CNN, how did you get on BBC, how did you get on New York Times and all that? It's basically just being able to know how to market your products and to be able to put it in front of the right people at the right time and be consistent at doing it in terms of reaching out to people. So, like I said, just to summarize, quality, provide value, and also educate yourself on the other aspects of business that is not just your creative, not just the creative atmosphere of what you're trying to put out there.
Do you have any more questions?
Hi, Elise Bola. You guys are doing it's amazing the work you're doing. It's very inspiring. And just as a plug, I know you're walking your paths to greatness. What would you say to the next generation? What would you say to that 7-year-old African kid who wants to create, the next Bino and the next comic book for Africans? How should they go about it?
I would say it's possible, because that's something that I didn't believe growing up. I looked up to, like I said, heroes like Superman, Batman, Transformers, Ninja Turtles, and I just thought, this is only Americans that can do it. I didn't see any Dino Morphine on screen. I didn't see any EXO. I didn't see any Nigerian characters, or not even just. I didn't even see any Nigerian African producers producing content based on Africa or Nigeria. So in my mind as a kid, when you tell me cartoon or you tell me superhero, immediately I thought about America. So I didn't think that it was possible for me as a child, because the moment I laid my eyes on animation and superheroes, I knew that I wanted to be part of that industry. But growing up, I just didn't think it was possible. To me, it was just a pipe dream. Like, it would be nice to do this. And then another thing I would say is also the parents too. It's very important to encourage the kids if they are interested in things like that. Now, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't do their homework or shouldn't go to school or anything like that. But everything that I've done so far has been a collection of maybe the past 8 to 10 years of my life. I can only imagine how far I've gotten if I've been doing this since I was in high school, or stuff like that. So what I would say to the kids is that if you have a dream, if you have a passion, this is what you want to do, try and be the best at it, and never let anybody tell you that you can't.
Adam?
I would say this, as a kid, you didn't have to tell me to do this. I wanted to do it. And I think what Roque said is quite important. As times go on, things will change. But before, I think a lot of our parents were worried because they didn't see this sector as something that could give someone a living. Now, I thought, they tried everything to stop me. And I don't blame them, to be honest with you, because I know why they tried it. But now, as we start to see more examples, all you gotta do is, the kids who have a passion for this, they're gonna go for it anyway. All you gotta do is support them. That's from my own personal experience anyway. The passion is there. You go for it. It's just whether people are gonna try and stop you.
And I hear what you're saying. If you're not a lawyer, if you're not a doctor, you're not regarded as anything in our society. But I think we have to commend you. You have to commend commend you, Roy and Adam, because now the next generation can say, well, Roy or Cooper did it, but Adam was there, he did it, and I can do it. So you're having a path which is difficult to have, but still, big path nonetheless. We have another question.
My name is Adeswa. So my question is, because I think what both of you are doing is amazing, and but what I'm worried about is that a lot of things like this become like a trend, and then when it becomes too much of a trend, it fades away, and then everybody's so excited about it right now. But what do you guys, both of you, think you can do to make it not just a trend, but the norm? Right now it's not normal, so we're all excited, but how do we make it become the norm, like Cartoon Network and, just everyday thing where, the future kids are just gonna be like, okay, this is normal. We have a channel dedicated to, not just African cartoons, but just, things created by us.
You want to start?
I think I hear what you're saying, and we need to build the infrastructure. We need to build the channels, distribution, basically reaching, so it's like you said, so it's not a trend, or it's not something cool because Africa is rising or whatever. It's something that, how do I put it? Like Disney's Disney, or Cartoon Network, Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon's Nickelodeon. If y'all want to, basically when people ask me what I'm doing, I'm just trying to make a simple cartoon for kids to watch. It just happens to be from Nigeria. It just happens to be that the characters in Nigeria. That's the way I see it. If you just do good content, do our best to have good business practices, and we're gonna need the audience. There's no two ways about it. If, for instance, we've had, even within our own Dino world, we've had people who watched the first DVD, which came out in 2010, who are now recommending it to people who now have children who were born after. With the DVD 2, which came out last year. So we're now slow building a generation of it, but it's gonna take time. And then of course, when you also have like critical mass, so you have Bino, you have EXO, Roy, you have what's it called? I forgot the name right now, but there's so many other like different. So it's not just us. If you have like a whole choice, that's when it now becomes the norm. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think you said something very profound. What I'll just add to that is consistency. I think that's really what is going to move this from being a trend to being the norm. Because, like you said, the trend is something that people just come in and do it while it's fun and everything, and then people get out. But I always try to attribute this to how it was with Nigerian hip hop 10 years ago. When MI and ADC first came on the scene, it was, oh wow, this guy, I've never seen things like that. I mean, for people that don't know MI and ADC, those are two of the most, the most popular rappers in Nigeria right now. So when they first came out, a lot of people were like, oh wow, this is cool, but it was also a trend. But they stayed consistent, and they stayed not just consistent, but they kept on putting out quality. And now almost everybody, there was a time everybody in Nigeria wanted to be a rapper or a singer. Anything. The industry has exploded right now. So I think for us, it's like I said, the infrastructure, but also being consistent in terms of the quality of content. It can't just be random things. The stories actually have to matter. They have to look good. They have to be engaging. They have to be educational, like what Adam was doing and things like that. They have to be, consistent. And we also, it can't just be about, okay, this is my story, this is what I want to do. We have to be able to inspire the next generation, because it's really more than just us. Like, 2 people cannot build this industry, 10 people can't build this industry. 2 people didn't build the animation industry in the way it is in America right now, the movie industry. So a lot of people have to do quality work on a consistent basis, and I feel like that's the way to transition from being a trend to something that
I think you're taking us there with pioneering what you're doing. We have another question.
Good afternoon, I'm Mrs. Masu. I'd like to comment on your efforts, given all the things happening, difficulties that you people will face, especially, it's not that you are working with somebody being at the background and you are creating on your own. Just as, people like Wole Soyinka and the others, started. And you people are trying to build a legacy. One of those things I observed since I came in late is the fact that you need to inculcate the awareness. That is, you've been talking of outreach. You have to broaden that aspect more. I'm here today because I have an interest. Before now, I just didn't know whether this website exists or not. So I think that's one of those things. And in terms of your productivity, I think there would need to be some variation, from the different things that you see. Like the Superman, the Batman, those ones are typical of some areas. There are things you can borrow from there and bring your own cultural thing, to bring it up and make it something unique. I've always believed in, having something different, something unique that people will rush, and that is what we cheer you to more success and people patronizing and taking part in what you are doing. I really congratulate you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I think, sorry, I can't remember your name, but she actually makes a very valid point. One of the things that makes us unique is our language. The fact that we're not, some of the languages that are spoken in Africa are not spoken anywhere else. And that makes us unique, even though English is the universal language. I read an article last week where it says that if care is not taken, many of the languages in Africa are going to get extinct in 50 years from now. The next generation is not really speaking it the way we do. And I guess I pose the question to you, given the challenge that the lady has given us, that what about your culture are you going to put in it? So are we going to see Wale Williams? Wale is a Yoruba name. Are we going to see him speaking Yoruba? I know that there is some sort of hesitation because some of the languages is strange to other people. But by the time you have everybody say Bawoni in America, and it has to start somewhere, Bawoni is hello, then you know that you've been able to pack a lot. So a question for starting with that, are we going to see the characters in Reno and Pino having elements of the Nigerian languages in them, and also to you growing?
Yep. You are. The thing is, due to resources, we can't move as fast as we'd love to. Like, I'll give you an example. Like Frozen, I think this Disney show, the Disney one, has probably been dubbed into over 100 languages. That costs millions. Now, it's only taken us this time to get to a stage where now we can invest in now having like Bino and Fino in Nigerian languages. Some, not because we have so many. But again, it's a process. It takes time. But what you said is if we can have, how do I call it? That's what I see in the future, basically. If you have like the shows in our languages, and they also radiate out. So if you want to watch it in Hausa, you can watch it in Hausa. If you want to watch it in Yoruba, you can watch it in Yoruba. If you want to watch it in Swahili, you can watch it in Swahili. French, whatever. So it depends what you're trying to attack. But it's very important to have the cultural aspect. But from our own point of view, it's just been strictly a business issue. Trying to get the revenue to get to that point. But the vision is to have it as many major African languages as we can.
Right.
Yeah, so you asked the question, like it was very important. You said, is there any hesitation to incorporate the languages? Like for me, honestly, there's zero hesitation. My book, the way when I was writing my book, I wanted to write it like how you would see people interacting in Nigeria. First of all, I think as important as in terms of our culture, integrating things like Yoruba, whatever, is very important. But I think culture actually goes beyond just what people speak. I think culture is how people behave. I think culture is how people interact with each other, their mannerisms and things like that. And these are all things that you see in my book. The characters speak broken. Some of the characters speak broken language. They tease each other with some of the slangs that you hear in Nigeria. All these things, they're in my book. But I don't do them gratuitously where it's like, okay, I want to put Yoruba, so let me just write Yoruba here. There has to be a purpose. Like, so if somebody is speaking broken language, why is he speaking broken language? Is it because he grew up in a different part of Lagos that, they are more apt to speak broken language, and that's why he's speaking broken language? Because I don't want to do necessarily what you see some of the industry, some of the things I see in the industry right now, where, and this goes beyond just Africa, where people put a black character in something because they want to feel a quota. Like, what's the reason? Why do you put it, or you change the character from white to black and say, okay, the new James Bond is black? Not that I have a problem with that. Or if it's not really tied to the story, then why are you actually doing it? So for me, I don't have any hesitation. The way people talk in my book is the way you see people talk in Lagos. And I think for me, different characters of different projects will express different sides of things that I want to do in Africa. Like the next book I'm doing is titled Malaika. It's based on a female African queen, but this is set in pre-colonial Nigeria in the 16th century. And for me, why I'm doing that is because I want to show a side of African royalty that you don't even get to see, in this day and age. So for me, doing EXO was to show a futuristic side of Lagos. That's something that people are not doing. There are a lot of people that are actually doing comics that people even speak more Yoruba, or comics that are based on, things like the Orishas and things like that. So people are doing different things in terms of expressing culture. This is just my way of expressing the side of Nigeria, the side of Africa that, is culturally relevant. And, but like for me, there's no hesitation. It's just about the approach and how you actually do it.
Thank you, Ray. We have one more question and we're going to wrap up.
Hello, my name is Paulette Puma, and I'm the creator of the African Memory Game, and I would like to thank Adamu for being online, and I really love his job. I have a question, but a comment. The comment I have is, what we need, creator, is the support of the diaspora, because we have so much criticism. I want it red, I want it blue, I want it yellow, but nobody brings the money on the table. It's just do it differently. So what he did is marvelous. I say, when you see his product, before trying and doing, buy. If you don't need it, give it to someone else. This is what we want from the diaspora, and I know this is recorded, so people will watch it on TV and everything, and we need the money from the diaspora to say, hey, this belongs to me. Own it. It belongs to you. He did it for you first. Emotional support, we have a lot. Oh, it's wonderful, but where is the money? Amen. The second thing I want to say is, are you already in the other country? I'm from Cameroon. Are we using Bambino and Fino in Cameroon or in Congo? If not, we have to be ambassador for doing that also. We have to push up the Minister of Education or anything to put it in program. So I want to know, so I know what action to take. Thank you.
First of all, it's a pleasure to hear from you. Because we've been talking on email sometimes. But for us to be able to take it to areas like Cameroon, etc., we have to bring it in the languages, which is what we're trying to do this year. Start getting into, first of all, start with, since it's a Francophone country, first of all, start with the French, and then start drilling down. But we haven't even looked at Francophone Africa, Cameroon, nobody. So that is totally new to us, but we have to create the product to enable us to do that first.
Ray, do you want to say something?
I mean, I agree with him. I think, and I agree with you too. And thank you for that comment. Like you said, a lot of people give a lot of emotional support. Oh, it's great, it's nice, but trying to get financial support is very difficult. So thank you for saying that. But again, I also put the onus back on us as creators too, where as much as we want support, we also have to create quality that demands that kind of support as well. So it's on both ends. It's not just one end of the spectrum where, okay, just support. We have to create quality that people can actually say, okay, you know what, I'm actually proud to endorse this too as well. So that's the difference.
Thank you. I think one of the most important things that we've heard today came from our friend over there, because we've heard outreach, we've heard quality, we've heard, emotional support, but at the end of the day, Africans in the diaspora, you have to put your money where your mouth is. You can't just say, oh, it's nice, but if you're not supporting Roye, if you're not supporting our family, it's not going to take us to where we need to be. But I did also want to give a shout out to Nika, because one of the reasons why we're here is because we're carving our path to greatness with this wonderful organization that she's created. And if she's back there, so if everyone wants to just give her a clap, just to thank her. So many, it's so easy for you to lose your identity when you're outside of where you're originally from, and you need somebody to bring that focus back to you. So thank you all for coming, and we'll definitely all collectively carve our paths to greatness together. Thank you. Thank you, Adamu. Yes, I think we have to go over there.
Thank you so much, Adamu. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time. He's gone. But I'll reach out to him later. But thank you guys for being patient and for being engaged. That's very, very important. Thank you so much. We're moving on to the next. But before we do that, thank you, our moderator, Jola Naiki. That was excellent. I mean, that was excellent moderation. It was very well done. We appreciate you so much. Thank you, Roye. Roye is still going to be here. He's going to be at the back if you want any more of the EXO comics. Is right there, autographing in gold ink. So please, go there and support. As I said, we need to support each other, not just emotionally, but financially and otherwise as well. We're going on to the next panel discussion, which is the theme of our lunch. We've been waiting for this. We have 8 guests. We have an excellent moderator, Nana Anna. So we ask you all to please come up to the panel, please. All our guest speakers, and we are gonna introduce you guys. Hand it over to Miss Nana, all the way from New York City. Hello, everyone. We're gonna give our guests.
How are you, ma'am?
right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon again. Welcome to our Paths to Greatness. Okay, so my name is Nana Manchomati. I'm the managing editor and founder of a literary blog called Afro Diaspora. And what we do at Afro Diaspora is we give a platform for our writers to talk about what's important to us. So here, this is our keynote event this afternoon. We're going to talk about three things. We have our panel, which I'm going to introduce in a minute. And then I have prepared questions, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So I'm going to introduce our guests now. I'm going to begin with my immediate left with Mr. Ikide Keloa, who's a literary and political critic. Next, we have Kumba Dafeka. She's an entrepreneur and CEO of Atresor, The Closet and Beyond. After that, we have Tope Bajingbesi, a social entrepreneur, author of What Color Is Your Money? And she's an inspirational speaker and radio talk show host. We have Adesua Okosun, who's a film director, producer, and CEO of Young Africa Media. We have Yejide Kilanko, author of Daughters Who Walk This Path and Chasing Butterflies, who's a therapist in children's mental health. We have Remy Dugile, forgive me. President and CEO of an Image Consulting Group. She's also an executive director of the Legacy Premier Foundation. Is a life coach at John Maxwell team. And last but not least, we have Etin Ayen, who's the founder of Nigeria Nostalgia Project and president of AfriWest Media. Please welcome our guests. All right, so we have three topics of discussion this afternoon. So our first topic of discussion, which is about our theme for this afternoon, is we're going to talk about history a little bit. Now, learning from our past is what this is under. For the past couple of years, we've been hearing this narrative that Africa is rising. Africa is rising, GDPs are rising, incomes are rising, but when you look a little bit deeper, there's still large inequalities in income. Access to basic education and medical facilities is still a challenge for many people. Corruption, as we know, still looms large in many governments. And so, that's sort of begs the question, structures are not in place. Are we really rising? And are we really learning from our past and moving forward? We're going to start with Mr. Ikide over here, and then we're going to move it down the panel.
Okay. I don't like the term Africa rising because it just seems like seems contrived to give the impression of the continent that is on the rise, when perhaps it is not. I do agree that in general we have moved quite a bit from the Africa of old, despite ourselves and despite our leaders. I think that technology is playing a big part of it. As the walls are coming down, we are finding that most African nations are under good attack by folks who are holding them accountable to build, you're exactly right, the infrastructure that is needed and the institutions that are needed to run modern societies. I know a lot of times when people talk about Africa, they're probably talking about sub-Saharan Black Africa. If you take Nigeria as an example, we have now found that 20 years, since 1999, almost 2 decades of democracy have shown that we need the infrastructure in place to run a country. We need processes in place, and we need an accountability system to hold ourselves and our leaders accountable. I think we are making a lot of progress in general in Africa. I think that we need to start moving to some degree from the deficit model narrative of Africa to a more realistic narrative. My problem with Africa Rising is a lot of times people, those that hawk that image, really are looking at Africa from the sense of mimicry. Hey, look, we have story buildings in Africa. We are making progress. Hey, look, we have feminists in Africa, so we're making progress. There's no, it is not tied to our indigenous ways of doing things. But I think some of that is changing.
I've always been the belief that Africa's problem is not a problem of resources, that our problem is not a problem of people. It's a lack of organization. Because if you look at from the Gambia, and I know most people, you have Cameroon, you have Nigeria, and being from Gambia and Senegal, we as a people, we have to really start embracing ourselves. And we also have to look deep down within ourselves and really be very honest with ourselves. It's not about comparing ourselves to the West. And because we're different people, the culture is different. The way we do things is different. I even tell people, when you get a Western education, it is almost you have to get an African education when you go back, because the way we do things in Africa is very, very different. So we have to, those resources, we the people, we're also resources. So money is also not a problem. How many monies have been given to Africa all these years, and all of it just go poof in the air? So basically, it's a lack of organization, and we have to start organizing ourselves. We have to start being very real to ourselves as Africans and who we are, and embrace that. And in embracing that, really have a platform to figure out how we can take Africa to the next level.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to answer that question, just being somebody fresh from the plane yesterday night, where I went to Women Deliver in Denmark. And there was something that the World Bank president said that really stuck with me. He said, when he was growing up, the GDP of South Korea was way less than that of Somalia. And today we all know that South Korea is a giant. So how does this translate to Africa rising or not rising? I want to challenge all of us who are here, that by the time they do Women Deliver in the next 3 years in 2019, the case studies are not about African children mortality and all the things that we heard this past week. It's about what you and I have done with the opportunity of the population that is growing. There are about 1 billion and growing people in Africa, and lots of them are young people. That means there's a market for what I'm selling, what you're selling. And so that is the Africa rising that I want to think about. What can you sell to the 1 billion people in Africa?
Hello? I'm gonna go with him. I don't like when people say Africa is rising. I think the whole Africa is rising has become like a brand. Like it's a product, and they clump everyone in one thing. Because when you talk about the U.S., you talk about America, United States, right? And then you talk about Canada, you talk about all these countries. But when it's us, it's like Africa, but there are different things that's going on in each country and different issues. So clumping us one and saying Africa is rising, it's not actually fair, and it's just a branding for corporations who are interested now because they see potential in countries like Nigeria and Ghana and all these other places. So I'm going to speak for Nigeria because that's where I'm from. You go back home and you see changes, very dramatic, and then you see the good, you see the bad. But then the bad is it's stagnant, and it just stays there, and nobody, I think I read somewhere where someone said, you can't do startups in a country that is not funding the poor. It's not believing in progressing the poor, but yet everyone wants to do a startup in Nigeria. It just makes sense. So this is why a lot of startup companies fail, because the masses cannot afford to support the startup. So you can't depend on the 1% to invest, continue being, consistent with your brand when you are not, the masses, everyone else who would have been potentials cannot afford,
Right.
So the whole Africa is rising. It's like Africa has been, it's been rising. It's just that, the West, and I don't mean to point fingers, but it's until the West takes attention, then we start saying Africa is rising. But there have been potentials for centuries, and but we just, but I'm gonna come as Africans, we have a bad habit of not paying attention to our own potential until the outsiders come in and look at us and say, oh, there's potential. And then we're like, oh, there's potential. So it's just a bad habit that we have. And but like I said, I don't like using that word because it's a trend now, it's a brand, and it's like, everyone, you see statistics and all these things of how, oh, the next best thing is Africa. But then you read and you're like, where? Like, what? Where exactly are you talking about? You don't know. Nobody knows. My mom just says the next place to invest is Africa.
They don't single out the right spots.
Right. So what should I go to Burkina Faso? Where there's, it doesn't make sense. So it's a form of of this idea that does not even relate to anyone who lives back home. So when you go back home, you go back to Nigeria, you're just like, this is not what I read about. It's total opposite, so.
And we're gonna come back to your points, but Ms. Yejide.
Yeah, so when I think of Africa Rising, while yes, it's a cliche, it's not a cliche and all that,
Right.
I think in terms of changing narrative. I think in terms of us understanding, when it comes to culture, as a writer, I think in terms of telling stories and telling stories. So no matter telling, there's other thing about telling our story, but understanding what our story is, understanding why we're telling, understanding why we need to tell it, and understanding that I've been living in Nigeria 16 years, so I'm always very careful to say this is to prescribe what I think Nigeria needs. Because if I haven't been here in 16 years, I'm almost becoming like an outsider. So it's the people who are leading there who knows, I can say this is what I think needs to change, or that people who are leading there get to decide for themselves, this is what we need, and challenge all those, the cultural norms. I think now what I see on social media, and I really love, is that we no longer just accept that somebody's an elder, automatically they know everything. We're creating spaces. So creating spaces for everybody to be able to express themselves, whether they want to be feminist, whether they want to be traditionalist, whatever it is that they want to be, that is a space for them to express that. And that in our cultures, all across Africa, and I was always asking about Africa, I've only been to Nigeria, sadly. So I can't even speak for a continent, because I can only speak for my country. And so I'm always very careful when I prescribe about Africa, because really, I don't know. I'm learning about it. I'm a student as well. And so I think when I think of African Rising, is being open to knowing and being open to accepting that you don't know everything. There's no shame in ignorance. I think the shame is when we pretend that we know and we don't create the space for other voices.
I think they'll turn it on.
Thank you so much. First, I'd like to appreciate the organizer and the visionary in the house. This is a very, very special opportunity. Again, what do we perceive Africa to be as Africans? Before I even go into this Africa Rising, because perception is reality. What do we as Africans, how do we as Africans see Africa? The way we see and perceive it is how we are going to conduct ourselves at interactions. Do we wear pride about Africa in every interaction that we engage in, even in our circular world? Those are food for thought for all of us. Back to Africa Rising, I believe that Africa is rising. There are opportunities every day that's moving us closer to that expected result. Of course, what we're doing here today is a sign that Africa is rising. When someone dreams and brings birth to a vision like this, it didn't just happen overnight. That's a thought, deep thought, born out of passion. And we're here today enjoying and engaging
in how to move Africa forward. Africa is rising because all of us, professionals, wherever we're represented, we are being given opportunities to represent Africa in America. America understands the power of Africa. I'm not sure if we Africans understand the power of ourselves. Until we truly embrace ourselves, and like my brothers who spoke earlier, Roye and Mr. Waziri spoke and said that you have to start. Do it afraid. Whatever your passion is, start with what you have. Who is going to believe in your vision and fund your vision just because you put it on paper? It doesn't work like that. Would you fund such things? Maybe not. Start with what you have. What can you use that's free? The online internet is there. Roy articulated that very well, that he has over 100 Kindle books. He had to probably go through that research. I don't know how to use the Kindle. I'm going to try to see if he can show me how to do that. But there's a lot of free resources out there. So as Africans, we just need to think about what can we do and worry less about what cliche somebody's saying. I want to give credit to the Western world. At least they're branding something. What are you and I going to brand and wear around and begin to sell? Because they're waiting. They're waiting. What are we going to come together as Africans? This room should be full of people now. This is an important occasion that has been announced severally, and people that are meant to be here are here already. This is a sign. We need to support our homegrown initiatives and worry less about what cliche or what anybody is saying about what we are doing. And if we do that intentionally, we will change Africa. Thank you.
So passionately, I don't think I can follow you. I can never follow that, but I'll try. Africa rising. Africa, well, maybe rising. I mean, to some people, I don't know. Africans have been rising. I think everybody said some wonderful things on panel so far about this issue. It's a brand, no doubt about it. But it's Africans in general, and I hate to say that because I don't believe in this Africans in general, because I don't think anybody really understands what the African identity is. When people ask you where you're from, and, I know there's some people in America say, okay, I'm from Africa. And tell me what does that mean? It usually doesn't mean anything. We are in the unfortunate position that we have been indoctrinated, or we've allowed ourselves to be indoctrinated by the frame of reference of a Western domineering world, system, and that has, and that's the unfortunate thing, is that we take our references from outside of ourselves. When there is so much wealth and there is so much, I don't want to use the word potential again because that's also cliche. There's so much value in what we have, and there's so much value in what in who we are. Now, I'll take it into another dimension. Let's look at Nigeria, for example, and let's look at corruption in Nigeria, okay? And let's look at accountability, which is the real, thing that's missing, accountability. And we wonder why accountability is missing. And we have stories like, I think recently there was a story about an Air Force, top guy or whatever it is, big man, who spent 3-point-something billion naira on money which was supposed to be devoted to Air Force staff salaries, and built a house for himself and built a house for his son. And the people from the Air Force actually helped to build this. The money was in a private bank, it was a commercial bank, not in the central bank, so they withdrew, he authorized payments, withdrew cash, to construct these kinds of things. Now, you look at that whole process, and I wonder, the first question that came to my mind is that, why didn't anyone say something? Let's start with all the different stakeholders. The family of the man. You know, your father is building you a house for 1.something billion naira, and you didn't ask him, where did you get this money? Okay, he has a wife or maybe some other city. Where is this money coming from? Then you think about the bank. You're making these withdrawals in cash, which is supposed to be money for the Air Force. And no one in the bank thought to say, well, you know, why are you withdrawing this money? You have people who haven't been paid in the Air Force who are following instructions and taking construction materials to this building site, and they didn't ask, excuse me, how come you're building and we haven't? Do you see what I'm saying? And whoever else may have known or encountered this. I find that this kind of situation is very commonplace. And why is it so commonplace? Why isn't anyone in all these institutions and all these structures, why are they not saying anything until years afterwards when there is a new government in power and there's some sort of, quest to remove corruption? Yeah. So one of the things I thought about, and this is just my own analysis, and I'm actually working on a documentary to try to bring this into the national conversation, if you like. And is that the accountability systems that occur naturally within Africa or within Nigeria or within African societies or African communities has been not, I think obliterated is too much of a word, but have been suppressed because they have been removed from the constitutional chain. There's no representation of those things. Now, I thought to myself, okay, why do we have, for example, if you have a community leader, an Oba, a king, or something of that nature, and he does something that is offensive to the community, you will find that people will rise up immediately. And there are instances that this has happened. I mean, a few years ago, I think the Deji of Akure, right? I think he beat his wife or put some hot water on her. He was sent into exile. People rose up and said, no, we're not going to have, even though people consider indigenous kings and whatever it is to be godlike. So you see that there is accountability there. When things happen at that community level, we go back to even back as far as 1953, when Bode Thomas died. Bode Thomas was a lawyer who died mysteriously because he was rude to the king, and the king said something to him. But he died the next day or something of that nature. But at the end of the day, the Oba was deposed. He was sent into exile by the action group a couple of years later. So what I'm saying is that there are indigenous systems, just like Fakili was talking about, that there are indigenous systems that have been, and structures that have been neglected and that are silenced by the structures that have been put in place by colonial mentality, you know what I mean? And that frame of reference, that everything has to be imported from the West and thrown into. So what happens in our government today is that our government is like a no man's land. People like Alami Sega, the governor of Bayelsa State, who was the lady, I don't know if you guys know the man who escaped from UK dressed as a woman or something like that. It was a big story. Okay, this man is lauded as a hero in Bayelsa State today. He embezzled money, lots of it. It was an embarrassment to the entire country. But today he's a hero. When he died, flags were at half-mast. So we see that when you go to the center of government in Nigeria and you come back to your local, and if you steal a lot of money, you are a hero.
All right. So, Tim, you bring up a good point about our governments being standard, and I kind of want to put this to all of you because it goes into that whole narrative. Okay, so Africa may be rising, maybe not, but why is it that we're not quote unquote learning from our past? Why are we not doing better? Corruption is still a problem. Basic education, basic electricity. In Ghana, where I'm from, we have this Dumswa situation. We turned a coin, Dumswa, which literally means lights off. Why do we still have that? Why why is no one rising up and saying, why is that? A few years ago, I work in the financial sector, and it was a very big deal for me and my colleagues when the 20 billion went missing from $20 billion went missing, and went into thin air, and there are governors and there's oversight and there's committees, and nobody still knows where that 20 billion went to this day. And it happens in Ghana, all the countries. We have these governments that that are educated abroad similarly, and all of us, we were all born there, we're all here. But things, yes, some things are changing, but those structural important things are not changing. We're not learning from our past. Why is that? This is for anyone who wants to.
I think in 1983, Chinua Achebe called it a failure of leadership. And when he was talking about leadership, a lot of people assumed that it was political leadership. From my perspective, it's broader than that. I think it's leadership period, intellectual, political, spiritual, and so on and so forth. We have to be careful on two fronts. I think that if you look at Africa, Africa is actually thousands of nations within a contrived space.
True.
So the second piece I want to caution is the way corruption has been defined is really defined by the West. What we call corruption in Nigeria is a lot more sophisticated than people realize. It is our form of currency. It is our transaction form. It is the way we do business, period. And so when you look at it from that standpoint, it becomes more complex. In the absence of institutions, corruption is the only way people from my village bring resources back home. If you're a brigadier from my village, Ewu, and you go to Lagos, and instead of bringing money home, you suddenly become a Jesus Christ is the Lord type of person. When you come back home, you will hear from us, because we totally expect you to bring back resources. And in the absence of resources, in the absence of a structure, that is how we do it. When I first came to this country, I was surprised by one thing. Down in Prince George's County, by the liquor store, I found American policemen with their squad cars. They were protecting the liquor store after hours. And I thought to myself, that's corrupt. Why are they doing that? And I found out that it's in their labor agreement that they are allowed to wear their uniform, take the squad cars, and protect liquor stores, protect churches, and get paid on it as police officers. In Nigeria, that would be called corrupt, you see. So if you go to church on Sundays, what do you see? You see Montgomery County police officers, directing traffic for good pay, time and a half. The church pays. We call that a negotiated agreement. In Nigeria, we call it corruption. So our intellectuals have failed us because they think real surface. They don't really think deep about these things. And one of the unintended consequences is that we have allowed the West to define us as losers, whereas, they are the winners. And Achebe even says this: until the lion tells the story of the hunt will always be glorified by the hunter. It is the West that tells us how we feel about ourselves. Now, since we came in 1999 as intellectuals and politicians to make these kinds of structural changes that were necessary in Nigeria. But what has happened? Our folks have gone in there and they have loitered around the place and have done little or nothing except to enrich themselves. And we have done little about it. I will tell you this, nobody believes this. A Nigerian senator uses Gmail to write to an American senator because there is no telecommunication system in the National House of Assembly. I will tell you this. The National House of Assembly spends billions of naira on the missing telecommunication system. So we need to do our work of holding them accountable. And there's good news. I think that what the young people are doing on the internet is just amazing. They are holding these people accountable. And in that sense, I hate to use that cliche, Africa is really rising. Because suddenly we are finding that there are African senators and legislators coming online to defend themselves. Before, that never used to be.
Right. Kumba, you being from the Gambia, you have a different perspective, maybe. You'll be really surprised. Africa, everywhere in Africa is the same. It's just a different level, or it's done a different way. Almost, it's like the fruit of the job, and that's what most of them. That's what they say. It's an expectation. And I live here in the United States, but I spend literally a lot of time, maybe 4 times of the year or 5 times a year, 4 months of the year in Africa. And this corruption that we're talking about is embedded in everywhere in society. I was just in the Gambia and I was talking to a friend of mine who actually was the administrator to the main hospital. This guy came in and just, wanted to be innovative. I'm going to change things. I'm going to make things happen. So he was taking his rounds. At the hospital, they cook for the patients. So they slaughter a cow every day, or several cows. So he's taking around just to, just check everything out and see what he needs to do to revamp the place. As he was going by the kitchen, he saw a lot of baskets. And he says, what are these baskets doing here? Well, and then one of the ladies said, well, sir, the workers of the hospital, they come and get their meat from here. And he says, but this is supposed to be for the patients. So he says, this is one of the things that I need to change because this meat belongs to, so I'm just talking about something so trivial, like meat, for you to just understand, and we're talking about billions, that's a whole different ballgame. So if just something like a piece of meat every single day, your family, you go and get your share for your family to cook. So for me, you're looking at that whole system. So when my friend wanted to come and change the system, they end up creating problems with him, and he got moved to a faraway place where he can do nothing. So that's where he is at right now. So these are the realities that for even Africans that are coming and want to change the system, because this is so much embedded in them, and this is their livelihood. This is what they live off of. So when you come and want to change the system, you end up being the person going somewhere far and beyond. So again, it's an education that we have to, it's a problem that is more complex, and it's not easier said than done. We could say, well, we have to change this, change that. We have to change the mentality of how we see ourselves and how, what can we do to change our situation at a level that's not even top level, but in terms of how we raise our children. So for me, we have to get back to those morals of what is right when we're raising our children, because the older generation, that's a lost cause already. So we have to go, with our children. We have this program called the Yes We Can Read program in the Gambia, where we go, we teach reading for meaning for children, but based on teaching them also moral values, looking at the environment, connecting some of the things that they're reading, taking it back onto that level. A lot of people might not think of that, but I think that is where we need to go. Education. Whoever is part of the solution is in education. That is where it needs to be. We need to teach people that they are responsible for the future. And I think that's where we need to start from.
Okay. Just to piggyback off Kumba said, and maybe this is for anybody on the panel, kind of, we know there's these problems. We know we have to change them. What are some of your thoughts on what we actually have to do to change some of the sort of things that we're not learning from the past
and moving us forward. This is for anyone. I'd like to say something about this. And I think, first of all, we expect this room to be fuller than this, but I want to caution everybody that the people who are supposed to be here are here. As somebody who's been doing this kind of thing for the past 14 years, I always focus on quality, not quantity. The room can be full of all sorts of people, and not one person will get anything out of it. Having said that, when it comes to government, corruption, moving forward, you have to see how this comes back to you. Because when you're thinking about government and you're thinking about them and not you, then you shift blame from yourself and you refuse to take responsibility for your actions. I run United for Kids Foundation in Nigeria, and we just got our biggest contract from ExxonMobil for $250,000 to send. Well, you might not clap after you hear some of the whole show, but to send 32,500 children from 16 states in Nigeria back to school, because this is the program that we've been running for about 8 years by ourselves. So we finally got this grant, not a grant, a contract actually, from Mobil, and we started running it. First of all, they wouldn't pay us for the first month. I was in Nigeria trying to push this, and please mind you, I'm a volunteer, so and Nigerians don't understand the fact that I'm volunteering for what I'm not being paid for. For free. Yeah, for free. Yeah. So I'm there, we're trying to get our money, they refuse, so we loaned $15,000 to start, and we actually started, and we're feeling really good. And about 4 weeks ago, one of the contract officers, there are 5 companies, all Shell, OneSubsea, NNPC, Mobil, these are big guys in the industry. One of the contract officers in charge of the contract started calling me on a Friday. He was even calling me during Jumat service, so I was wondering what happened. So immediately we finished Jumat, I called my staff on ground. I said, what is the problem? They said, no, nobody has called us from Mobil. I said, okay, good. I just want to be sure you could not screw up anything. So I called the guy, and he starts to tell me everything that is wrong with what we're doing so far. Meanwhile, they haven't paid. Okay, they just paid the day before. So I'm telling him, there's nothing wrong. You haven't seen the bags. So the next thing, he gets to this point of he wants to donate a highest boss when we're going to his state. I said, as a Nigerian who goes to Nigeria 6 times a year, I know what that means. That means there's something coming. So I said, don't worry about the donation. We have this covered. He said, I just want to help you. I said, don't help me. So the next thing he said, can you go to my village, swap some of the children that we agreed for the ones in my village? I said, sure, we can do that. I just want to see it in writing. He said, oh, they said you're an auditor. You're really being an auditor now. I said, yes, this is my job. I've done it for 17 years. I'm an accountant. So I need to see it in writing, evidence. Of course, he doesn't want to do that. So the next thing he goes, you've been paid for your first 60%. Now you should put in for your next 20%. I said, but it's not your time. The contract says when we finish branding the bags is when we should put in. He said, because you live in America, you don't understand these things. You just take a picture of one bag that you branded, and you will just collect the money. I said, I'm sorry, I don't work that way. So as I was about to go off the phone, thinking that I was done with his first 6 requests, he brings the elephant, the large one, and he says, okay, I just want to say something. You know, I've been working hard for you. I would like you to sell the dollar that you got. We got $90,000 the day before from Mobil. I'd like you to sell the dollar to me. And if you know what's happening in Nigeria, the dollar is going insane. So I said, absolutely. Actually, I just told the bank that I need to sell the dollar. He said, yeah. I said, so okay. He said, so how much do you want to sell it? At the time, the dollar was 320. I said, because it's you, I'll sell it for 310. He said, no. I said, how much do you want to buy? Me, I know where he's going. How much? He said, at the rate we gave you. I said, you didn't give me anything. I said, you didn't give me anything. Let's just be clear about that. Mobil gave United for Kids Foundation something. So he went on a serious tangent, emotional blackmail, everything blackmail of why I should sell him the money so he could round trip and get some millions on his seat. And I said, let me just explain to you, Mr. Donald, this is never going to happen. And I say this to tell us that when it comes to corruption, we are the ones who can change it. We are probably never going to get any more money from Shell, NNPC, Mobil, ever. And my staff have told me I've screwed this up, but I don't care. And until we begin to learn how not to care what comes after, we're never going to change anything. And I also want to encourage all of us to go to Nigeria, Uganda, Botswana, anywhere. We can't sit down here and say Africa is rising or not. Somebody said it here, you get an education when you get in there. I go 6 times a year, and every time I go, something has changed. I have to put on a different cap. So I can't come here and be telling you about Africa when I don't know Africa. And let's not be bothered about the fact that, oh, there are 54, whoever is counting countries. America is 50 states or 50 shades of people, and it's a big market. Let's tap it. I would classify Africa as one if I can sell my market, and you should as well. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, great. So go ahead, I'm fine. So to kind of tap into what she was saying, it is true that every time I go back to Nigeria, and also to tap into what she's saying, that as a Nigerian, I've only been to Ghana outside of Nigeria, because Nigeria in itself is overwhelming. So yeah, going to Ghana is like a different world, like seriously. But in fact, to touch on the corruption part of Nigeria, I'm a little younger, but I hear, all my life I hear Nigeria, corrupt. But then I started trying to understand where the corruption is coming from, and one of our biggest problems is that the citizens are very educated, but the leaders are not. So, and it's a very confused situation, because the people back home are like, you hear them speak and you feel like, yes, something's gonna happen. They know what's going to happen, but but unfortunately, I think Nigeria has I'm sorry, I'm just speaking about Nigeria because that's just all I know for now. But Nigeria has this habit of, money. Money can cover a lot of things. You don't need to do so much. You don't need to work so much, like harder than the average person, because you have money, and money can buy a lot of things. You can buy education, right? Because I have an example. When I was younger, knowing who my father was, I would bribe my teachers with CDs so I could skip to the next grade level. And this would work, if someone comes to education for the so-called, people who are supposed to have the pathway to lead us, a lot of them fought their way to a point where they are. Right. So when they get there, the education that you and I have, they don't have it. We're more educated than them. So what is common sense to us does not make sense to them, because their whole life has been bought to a level where they will sell the, like just like the Nigerian guy who sold an airport, just, it's just like, but it's also about like accountability and responsibility. Who's responsible for this? Who's responsible for hospitals? Who's responsible when, doing operations with with candle lights and, all these things. And these are people who we know better, but because no one is gonna check after, no one's gonna look and say, hey, what happened here? Right, explain yourself. Right. So anything goes. It's the land of, and I just came back 2 weeks ago from Nigeria, and my experience was, it was progressive, but it was challenging, because I went back and I said, okay, I'm going to do a documentary, and I want to film, I want to spend a couple of days with sex workers, and then I want to spend a couple of days with street guys, the area guys, and then I want to spend a couple of days with, so we have this thing called keke in our house. So, but we don't have female. We barely have female drivers. It's still a man's world in that department. So I found a female. So I wanted to host. So in the whole process, I didn't need permission from the city of mayor. I didn't need any. Did it? I had to speak to the area guys. These are the governors of Lagos. These are the mayors. They're the leaders, right? And they're the ones who rule. They tell you where to park. They tell you where to, they tell you where to do anything. And I was filming in the area where it was like, it's not, yeah, I was filming in an area that was pretty much like, it's a train, railroad tracks where people live and stuff. And my sister donates every Sunday. So I'm filming her and they noticed I had a camera. And it became this war, it was like a riot. And I had 50 guys harassing me. And my sister is half my size. And she's like, you know, I was shocked because she turned into this like, this wild person. And I'm like, she's like, don't open your mouth, don't speak, don't let them hear you talk, just shut up. And it was like, we had to be like animals. We had to be like, you know, very aggressive. And they don't even know what I had. They didn't know the value, but they just knew that I was either gonna pay or they're gonna take my camera.
Right.
And they could tell by my face that I would die from my camera. So the aggression increased because they knew there was something valuable. So they saw 5 people protecting me and they were like, okay, yeah, she has something. And that's how it starts. So there's this attack before calming down and discussing, and that's exactly what happened. And everyone knows that's what's gonna happen.
Sure.
So there's this like, oh yeah. And then there was this calm, and then there was an exchange, and then there was apology, and there was understanding, and then we gave like 1,000, you know, like.
So you ended up just giving money.
Yes, and that is how our government is.
Right.
It's like that. It's let's go for us first, and then when the people react the way they didn't expect them to, then they calm down, and then they apologize, just like how the politicians are interacting with people now, because they didn't know people are noticing. They didn't know that we can react. You know, they didn't know that we're just as aggressive as they are. So you have to use Twitter to sell themselves, and they use Instagram and all this. And it just, and I am happy for social media because social media has opened a lot of doors. You know, when you see a governor treats, you know, a street person somehow, someone's recording it.
Right.
And then they post it, and then that governor apologized. And you never used to get that because these people were told that they were kind of like demigods, and anything they do go, you know, like they have to just shut up and accept it. But now we're using social media and internet to spread the word that, you know, we know our government's corrupt. And the only issue I feel is that it's a royalty, and only a certain people get to have access to certain positions.
To make
And unfortunately, you know, people are like, oh, why do Africans keep, you know, voting for the same government? We see the case of like Burkina Faso, and we see the case of you know, other countries where the presidents are there for 30 years. It's not about that the people want, when the people revolt, there's a civil war, and they lose because no one supports it, you know, and the government who's supposed to protect them fights them. So we're not, you know, Africans are not stupid. We're not, you know, mad people who do the same thing over and over and over again. It's just because you keep banging on the same door and nobody, you know, it's just more pressure not to open it, and no one wants to fix it. And this group of people would never get off.
I see. Right. Now, so far we've established that, you know, Africa may be rising. There's work that needs to be done. Kumbe and some of you on the panel have said it's really about mentality and changing that mentality. But I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about all of us here. Now, we're all Africans in the diaspora. I'm from Ghana. We have the Gambia, we have Nigeria, we have certain other countries, and we all live abroad. And we know that the diaspora, you know, makes a big difference in what's going on, not just economically, the amount of money that we send back every year in remittances, but in terms of, you know, for example, what Tope is doing with the organization. So in all of you, and what you do in your capacity, which is all related to Africa, I wanted to ask you, this is sort of, you know, getting the personal, if you will, what employs you to do what you do for the continent, for that company? You're filming about sex workers, you know, Tope is doing something with the kids and education them, or what Etim is doing, or Yejide who's, you know, writing and telling our stories, or even Pride is the literary critic, but it all goes back. So what is it inside of you that kinds of pushes you to do all? We'll start with the team and then we'll come down.
So your question is, what are we doing and why are we doing it? Yeah? Okay. Well, I personally, I started this organization called the Nigerian Nostalgia Project simply because I was angry at the Nigerian 50 celebrations. I think that was back in 2010, and some I think a friend of mine had said to me that had invited me to some dinner or something, which was supposed to be attended by by the wife of the president at the time, and I actually went to one dinner, and then but the whole Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the whole entourage were so sloppy and they was useless. So to cut a long story short, so I was kind of and they gave gifts, and these gifts were brought in Macy's bags.
I was a party gift.
That was not gifts to everybody. This was gifts to the people. The actual islands were serving. Yeah, it was a gift from countries presented by the foreign minister Madueke at the time. Yeah. And it was in the Macy's bag, and so this infuriated me. And I think I left, and then he invited me to some other event. And I said I'm not going, and we ended up having an argument. And he said it was, and he called me unpatriotic. And it didn't mean anything when he said it, but as I drove home, I think I was almost, by the time I was almost crying, because I felt that, what on earth am I doing in this country? Why am I here? I should be in my own country. What am I doing? And my father who lived here before, also lived there, what was he doing here? So it made me question a lot of things. And the question made me question whether I was being unpatriotic. And I realized that, okay, what is it that we should be celebrating? What is it that we should be celebrating? And I thought that, okay, we should be celebrating. I didn't know what it was, but I knew I had pictures at home from when I was a child, from when I was, grew up in Nigeria. And I thought, and I started to, and I think I created the group. I was yelling at my wife from the living room, and she was in the kitchen. I was saying, what am I going to call this? Some computer. And then I created this group on Facebook, and I posted the photographs that we had. And then I went to my parents' house and got photographs that they had. And then I encouraged friends. So that's what's turned into this identity project, which we have now. And I found that really what it is that in those pictures, what I found is these are the values that Nigeria should be celebrating. These are the things when we actually have our collective thought is what we should. What is our collective thought? What is our vision? Our common vision, and what is our common identity? What are those things? What does it mean to be a Nigerian? What is it? So, and those elements, and all those elements are things that I'm interested in now. In showing that we should answer your question. The previous question you had was about what do you have to do? You have to educate, and so the Nostalgia Project has turned into a mass education project. It's the idea is to broaden the audience and to educate the audience with using tools, taking the history which you can't change and reformatting it into media that can be consumed by a wide variety of people in a very short space of time. So, there's no history in schools anymore, apparently, in Nigeria. And so I see really that we're filling a gap. Right. And until we begin to understand what our values are, what our common values are, and we begin to have some respect for those values, that's when we begin to treat each other better.
I see. Now, for Rumi and Neji, I'll ask the question before we open up to the public. I just want to ask you, two of you, in terms of why you tell the stories that you do, why you do the things you do, and how it connects all back to Africa, why you think that's important really is the question.
Yeah. I want to piggyback on the corruption and solutions you wanted earlier, because we said a lot of what is wrong. Mm-hmm. We also want to be able to have some recommendations to how we can move forward, so we don't dwell on the past. I've been here for 34 years in the United States, came here at age 17, and I have journeyed in corporate America, senator to vice president, and also engaged myself in the community.
one thing that I believe that we all need to do as Africans, we need to engage in our host communities so that we can leverage and maximize the opportunities in this country. I know we want to do exploits for Africa, so do our host countries, but who better can they leverage? We are the bridge builders. We are the Africans, the closest to Africa that they will get. But when they need us to be found, we're nowhere to be found. And people do business or relate to people that they can trust. How do you build trust if you do not engage in building relationships? And you can do that through volunteerism. If you forget anything that I would say and remember my face way, strategic volunteerism is the way for us to really build that Africa that we as diasporans want. And volunteering, engaging in celebrate what people are celebrating, that will give birth to your passion. It will give back to your vision, like some of us do in churches and so forth. We need to intentionally do that in our communities so that as Africans, we need to stop complaining. We need to do things afraid. We have people who are already doing things afraid, but we want to be able to help connect with Africa. Right. I lived in Nigeria for 5 years. I worked in Nigeria for 5 years. And I understand what my sister is saying about the mobile and all those other things. You can dare to be different because we are all culprits to this so-called corruption. If you do not do your part and play it well because you want to belong to the Joneses, you will quickly be worse than the Joneses. Right. So the ability to dare to be different, and for us as diasporans, to work collectively and support each other and share each other's network, leverage each other's sphere of influence without expectation of something is really key. So I want to tell us all that we're knowing each other today. We want to continue this dialogue so that we can say, when we say Africa is rising, we know it's rising because we have facts to prove it. We're not going to say, oh, somebody is saying it because it's a cliche. Let's make it a brand and lead that Africa rising phenomenon. Thank you. Yes, you did.
When I said writing, I wasn't really writing like because I wanted to brand Africa, or like I was writing because I was trying to express myself. But what I found is that now it's given me a platform. That's why I'm here. So it's given me a platform for me to partner with other people. To me, partnership is very important when you're trying to build a dream. So it's giving me a platform to speak to other people and financially support other dreams. People who are going to Africa to do things. I might not be in a position for life to go to Africa and do things, but there are other people who do, and I can support them. And so, and I write my story set in Nigeria because that's a core part of who I am. Right. That's me.
Write about what you know.
Yeah, that is me. And the characters that reflect me, that reflect my experiences. And when I get readers who, they email or we talk and they say, you know what, that was my story. And when I was reading as a child, I was able to read books and find myself in those stories, and they made a difference for me. So I think books make you dream, and we need to keep on dreaming. That our life is not just more about feeding ourselves, it's more about not basics. It's not like, oh, we have to find food, housing. We need to dream, because it's from dreams that big things can happen. So if my stories in any way can be a part of that narrative, for me, that's a blessing.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Now we're going to open up to our audience for Q&A.
Thank you very much to all members of the panel. I can feel the energy, I can feel the passion. One of the most hilarious things that I saw on the internet a few weeks ago, and like today, I haven't lived in Nigeria in a very long time, so very often I don't feel qualified to comment on trends happening in Nigeria. But recently, David Cameron was caught on camera saying something about Nigeria, referring to us as one of the most corrupt countries in the world. And shortly after that, soundbite was released. We had, I don't know who he is, but apparently he's well known and not very popular in Nigeria. Dino Melaye went out and said something that, how dare he say that But the one thing that I latched onto was, I don't know the gentleman's name, but somebody came back at him and said, Dino Melaye, locate mirror, look in it, there you see corruption. And I thought that was fantastic. Like I said, I don't know who he is, but obviously he must have, had the reputation for himself as a corrupt person.
His name is Okfor.
But the reason I'm bringing that up is, you can see the energy. When are we in Nigeria going to hold our government accountable to that point? I don't live in Nigeria, but I have a lot of family in Nigeria. My family has a school. And yesterday I was talking to my brother, and he said something which broke my heart. He said, and the way he said it so casually, I was really taken aback. We haven't had light for at least 4 weeks now. And I said, what? How have you been managing? This is Nigeria now. You create your own convenience for yourself. I can't imagine myself living as I have lived abroad for as long as I have, and not being able to hold on to one person to say, come, why don't we have light? We haven't had light for 4 weeks. Meanwhile, in the same conversation that I had with my brother, he said to me, but I see the NEPA boys around. They're always walking around looking for something. Why? And I'll kick it up a notch. I think it's 3 years now. We had 4 girls who were taken from their school. And you can imagine how heartbreaking that is for me, because I went to an all-girls school. And I sit in this country and I have people telling me that, you're so lucky to have come here to get an education. And I feel very insulted, because the education that I got it in Nigeria. So you can imagine that we're having a reputation now that when girls go to school, they can be taken out of their school and be found anywhere taken by terrorists and be found anywhere impregnated. And it's not to the point where it's very disgusting. When are we going to start to hold our government accountable for the things that they are not doing?
I'm sorry. I wanted to answer just a little bit. I think it's kind of, it's a little unfair to expect a revolution immediately when a group of people have been oppressed by their own people for years, and oppression as in manipulation and everything. And so this group of people from generation to generation, this mentality is passed on. And then now you feel the revolution, you feel it. It's starting to, begin, but it's not gonna happen overnight. Getting over slavery, there's still people who have gotten over slavery, and it's still we're still, fighting for that. But when you have a group of people who are oppressed, now, no one ever taught them to hold anyone accountable. No one ever taught them to say, hey, I haven't had NEPA for a month, but yeah, I still get a bill to pay for electricity. No one, and they pay religiously, because there is this hope. The abused always hopes that at some point there's love from the abusee, and that's that relationship.
Right.
The government is the husband that beats on the wife, and we are the,
Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna have to. We're gonna get a last word in, and then we're gonna have to.
Yeah, well, she's right with it. There's no immediate solution. There's going to be, but there are some fundamental things that need to be changed. Like I said before, I think that Africans, Nigerians, wherever this is, wherever there's an absence of accountability, and the kind of accountability that you're talking about here in terms of power supply. Those things can change. Those things can change very quickly if you get the right leaders in place. Now, getting accountability in all throughout the entire system is going to require a little bit more than that. It's going to require some fundamental changes to our constitution, which I don't think we're even ready for right now, because if you make a pronouncement about, for example, if you give let's take, for example, no offense intended, Oba Benin, if you give him $10 billion to say, okay, I'm the federal government, I'm giving you $10 billion. work to actualize your community development plan. And I'm holding you accountable for it. I'm holding you accountable for it. I will tell the people that I gave you 10 million because your people can go on LinkedIn and see where they said, okay, about the name $10 billion. And you don't build the roads, you don't build the schools, you don't build the infrastructure. We have all these, great institutions which are lying fallow in Africa. Yeah. That some of the kings and queens are the most educated people. They're the first beneficiaries of Western education. Yep. Their children are the beneficiaries of Western. They become obas, they become kings, and after that they are completely useless, and they are relegated to ceremony and ritual, and secrecy and mystery and stupid things like this that do not benefit. And you find that Nigeria, for example, has earned massive oil revenues over the 40-year period, and no community across the entire country can you find any evidence of development.
Wow. So we have a long way to go. Yes. And these discussions we can talk about all day. I want to say thank you so much to all our guests. Please give them a hand of applause. Do we have time for one more question? Do we? Okay. We're going to do two quick questions, please. The woman in the red and then the man in the black. All right, I'll make this quick. I took lots of notes. First of all, thank you so much for being here. You guys are wonderful, accomplished. I wasn't sure what I was going to get when I saw our path to greatness. I was like, is it going to be another one of those talk, and then I'm not going to get anything, but my phone says different. I have a lot of notes. So first, a comment. I'm a writer, and I took a writing class way back in 2006. And I remember my writing professor telling me, she was like, your stories are really good, but I don't know how to market you because you're not expected to write like this as an African. Can you throw in, something more African? And I was like, lady, I saw a lion just like you in the zoo. I was, born in the US. I mean, this is my African. There's got to be people like me who were maybe born here, raised half in Nigeria, half in the US, and this is our reality. We do like regular things too. I've never hunted, I've never, and kudos to people who write about the war. That is wonderful. Those stories need to be told. But how about the story of a regular girl, who is just Nigerian, because her parents are Nigerian and she identified as Nigerian. So that made me mad. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna write my own book and I'm gonna market myself and I'm gonna make a publishing company. So I now own an indie publishing company. And I tell our story. And I publish, I publish stories that maybe are not niche enough or maybe fall through the cracks or are not African enough or are not American enough, but they're stories that are just as important, to me and to the world. So I took some quick notes from you guys, and this is what, this is my summary. Get mad. I got mad. When you get mad, let it propel you to action. Get mad when someone tells you you shouldn't be this or you shouldn't be that, because people love labels. It makes them comfortable to label, but that doesn't make it okay. Get aligned. This is an alignment. Get aligned with like-minded people. You're not a unicorn. There are people like you. Get aligned and then come together and then do something about it. Let this talk become a verb. Do something. I started a publishing company. Write something. Someone said, do something while afraid. And support someone. Support someone. Don't wait for it to be endorsed by the West before it becomes okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We have two quick questions in the back.
Hello, thank you so much for this presentation. I came kind of late, I'm sorry about that. I wanted to comment on what the gentleman mentioned, and it's about President, is it Buhari? That's his name, right? Yeah. The current president. So when Cameron made that silly comment, I was put up because the West has no right to make any comments about corruption. And we know it already. I mean, I'm from Ghana. We know we're corrupt and we're trying to work it out. So I was very happy about how Buhari said, I don't want an apology from you. That's right. That's right. So that's how we have to come at them and that shut them up completely. So, but I wanted to just ask that, is it like people like Gaddafi, and because I haven't been to Ghana for a while, I'm planning to go this year, but Gaddafi got killed, I think it was doing everything. But is it because they stay so long in power
So then they lose the support of the people, because I think the great leaders like Mugabe just spoke at the United Nations. He said great things. He knows how to say it, but then they stay for 30, 40 years and hold on to power so long. There's no support from the people, or is it that when you're in Africa, you don't really see? I don't know how, you know, do you understand what I'm coming from?
Now, for our panelists, I said we have to make it very quick.
Oh, okay, I'm so sorry.
I wish I knew the answer. I went to Uganda last year, and I was expecting a country, it's a small country, I was expecting a country like Nigeria. There's going to be a lot of hassle at the airport and all kinds of things going on. I get to the Entebbe airport, and there are only the number of workers that they need in that airport. Nobody asked me for a dime, and I was expecting to give something. I go into Kampala. There is water flowing. There is light flowing. I'm coming in from the United States. I'm like a bushman looking at the thing, expecting it to. And I was there for a week. The traffic lights, we were a bunch of Nigerians staring at the traffic lights. They wouldn't go off. So, but on the other hand, you've got this man, Museveni, who's been there since 1984, thereabouts. And people are yelling at him. And I'm thinking, well, it would have been nice if somebody like Museveni had been in Nigeria since 84, so that I can see light, I can see water, nobody will hassle me at the airport when I go. So our notion of democracy is defined by the West. That's the first problem. So our notion of governance is defined by the West. We have dissociated ourselves from the traditional ways of our ancestors, and we are trying to live a life we cannot sustain, period.
I want to talk about partnerships. I've been doing United for Kids Foundation for 14 years, but now I set up Impact Africa. Go to our website, impactafrica.co. If you're doing anything in Africa, join that alliance. You maintain your individualism, but at the same time, you get a couple of people who can be a community for you.
I just have a quick comment. I'm sorry.
We have to cut it. I'm so sorry. I'm very, very sorry. We have to cut it. I just want to say thank you to Nika and Tunde. Thank you all of you for coming, and thank you to our guests. All right.
All right, everyone. My name is Daniel Karoma. I'm the County Executive's African Liaison. I just wanted to thank you on behalf of the County Executive for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, liaison of the county executive. We're surprised. We're happy to have you here. And thank you to everyone for coming. Hope we will see you tomorrow at the gala. It's going to be right here. So it's going to be Warrior Africa event. Thank you. God bless.
And you can continue the conversation on Twitter at #OPTGLaunch2016. Feel free to continue the conversation on there. Thank you.
Man, you're all dressed up, and I mean, you people are dressed up.